Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe and all the good stuff, blah blah blah. Today we are going to be on Fred and Rose West. They're very notorious within the UK, in the Gloucester area, so I will crack on with the story. Fred West was born in Gloucestershire, much Markle, born 29th of September 1941, one of 6 children. Fred had somewhat of a strained relationship with his parents. His mother was, we've been told, sexually abused him from a very young age. His father is somewhat of a abuser himself. To what degree? Still unknown. During his teen years, thoughts were that he was a very normal young man, although he did have somewhat of issues with younger girls. At the age of 17, he had a motorcycle accident and was very badly injured. He had severe head injuries, which made him more aggressive, somewhat more of a sexual predator. After this, he became an ice cream man. Now, an ice cream man in the UK is, they'll have a van, they'll go around street to street. Usually they'll ring some kind of tune, kids hear it, they know that the ice cream man, they can go out and buy ice cream. This is what he did over the streets, basically. So during this time, a few things happened to him that sort of molded him into what he was and what he became as such. One thing was, he was accused of impregnating a 13-year-old at the age of 20, 21-ish. He did get prosecuted, he did inevitably get charged and found guilty. Unfortunately, he did absolutely no jail time. He got a fine and a slap on the wrist, don't do it again. Clearly our justice system sucks for this kind of thing, and to some degree still do. On another note is, on the 4th of November 1965, he accidentally ran over a young boy and killed him. He was cleared of all charges. In September 1960, he met Renee Costello. They dated for several months before she returned to Scotland. They started dating again somewhere around November 1962. A child was born in March, a baby girl named Charmaine. During this time of the ice cream van, he was still continually picking up young girls. In 1964, a second child was born, Anne-Marie. During this time is where Fred's first victim, Anne McFall, came into the picture as the nanny. He had a sexual relations with her. It was a two-sided relationship to what can be made out. Again, it was quite weird. She was just a young girl. He was working at this point as in a slaughterhouse, which is where I think the catalyst came to what he did later on with the mutilation and dismembering. While in Gloucester, there was 8 reports of him being inappropriate with younger girls. Nothing ever came of it. Fred and Renee married. Over the next coming months, their relationship became more and more unstable. She left without her girls and left for Scotland. She returned some months later to find Fred and Anne McFall in a relationship and Anne McFall pregnant. Early 1967, McFall became pregnant with West's child, begging him to divorce and marry her. Somewhere around July, Fred killed a pregnant Anne McFall and buried her around the caravan park, but not before cutting off some of her digits and toes. Become somewhat of a signature for him later on. Thereafter, Rennie moved back in with him and the children. Within 6 months, Fred was suspected of the disappearance of a 15-year-old girl named Mary Bethel, who was abducted in January 1968. No charges was ever made. In November 68, he became acquainted with Rose Letts, who was to become his wife, his longtime partner in life and in crime. Rose was born in North Devon on the 29th of November 1953. She was the fifth of 7 children born to Bill and Daisy Letts. Rose's mother Daisy suffered severe depression and had ECT during her pregnancy. This is electric therapy. It was done quite a lot in the UK during pregnancy. That actually, if I'm honest, confused me a little bit, but I digress. This could clearly have caused the issues with Rose that she had throughout her childhood and well into adulthood. She was also abused by her brother and her father and her mother. There are different stories to what you hear. Some say that she abused her brother, others say he abused her. For sure, her father sexually abused her from a very, very young age. That is something that was known and very much openly spoke about, which is very bizarre again. After Rose's parents got divorced, she stayed with her mum until she was 16 and went to live with her dad at Bishop Cleeve, Gloucester, which again is not far from Muchmarcle. After their meeting, Rose just turned 15, Fred was 27. During the coming weeks, months, he lavished her with attention, which was something that Rose missed in life. Shortly thereafter, they began a relationship, frequently visiting the caravan where he lived with his 2 young daughters, Charmaine and Anne-Marie. Rose became a sitter, watching his kids while he was at work. Several months later, Rose introduced him to her father, Bill, and mother, Daisy, who was completely against the relationship. Rose's parents defied her from seeing Fred, but of course, as most girls' ages at 15, 16, she did not listen. During that time, she was very out of control. Her parents contacted social services asking for help, telling that she was dating a 27-year-old man and heard among the small village that she was prostituting herself out. August of 69, Rose at 15 was taken from her home and placed in a home for troubled teens, quote unquote. So all coming and goings was controlled. These sort of places was a lot like, I suppose, a lot like a jail for teens, or wayward teens as we would call them back in the day. So it would have been more, everything would have been scheduled. She was allowed home on weekends, to where she would sneak to see Fred. On her 16th birthday, she was let out from the home of the troubled teens and returned to her dad's house. During the time, Fred was serving a 30-day for unpaid fines. After his release, Rose moved into a flat near Cheltenham. Soon thereafter, he got his 2 kids back from social services. Again, how on earth social services gave him them children back is something I think we'll never ever know. After this, Rose was pregnant and told her family about it. She would be no longer welcome in their home. 3 months later, they moved to a bottom flat in Midland Road, Gloucester. On the 17th of October 1970, Rose gave birth to her first child, a girl named Heather. 2 months later, Fred was incarcerated again for theft and wasn't released until June 1971, leaving a 17-year-old looking after 3 girls. According to Anne-Marie, she and Charmaine would frequently get into it and she would abuse Charmaine. Hospital records show that Charmaine had injuries consisting of puncture wounds, bruising, quite an extreme amount of abuse this child's endured. On the 15th of June, we know that Rose took Charmaine, Anne-Marie and Heather to visit the jail. It believed a few days after Rose killed her, whilst Fred was jailed, being released shortly afterwards, telling everyone that Renee had showed up and took her back. Did she tell Fred first off? Probably. I think they were very much a partnership in not just love but in crime as well. So I would think straight away he was informed, but we know for sure that a few months later that he did know, and he buried her in the cellar of their home. August 1971, Renee tried finding where Fred was, and most importantly where her girls was. Fred's sister-in-law gave her the address in Midland Road, and she was to go there, never to be seen again. We can only guess what she had to endure at the hands of Fred and Rose West. Her body was later found at Yortree Letterbox Field, which is a field not far from Muchmarkle. During the late 1972, they moved to Cromwell Street. This would also be where all the rest of their crimes took place. Fred was a very talented handyman. He fitted the cellar at 25 Cromwell Street for Rose to entertain her clients, but also what would be known later as the torture chamber. Anne-Marie was one of the first they used to, quote unquote, practice their torture chambers. On and off for years, they raped, abused, left hanging. These girls tolerated a lot from this house. This behaviour clearly extended to more than just family. Late in 72, they met Caroline Owens. As a nanny, they tied her up, stripped her, mutilated her, raped her, constantly being told she would be killed. Somewhere around this, Caroline tells the story that Fred had come in and raped her without Rose. He was scared at this point. He was like, please, crying, don't tell Rose that happened, please don't tell Rose. Inevitably, I don't think she was going to say a damn word, but she managed to convince him to release her, or convince them to release her. They allowed her to go with the promise that she would come back and continue being a nanny for the children. She reported them to the police in 1973. They were both in court for the offences. Rose was pregnant with her son Stephen by this point. Caroline gave a statement. They were both found guilty, but again, no prison sentence was ever given. Both given a fine. Stephen was born thereafter in August. This, I believe, gave them the future that they couldn't leave anybody live after this. This is the third time they've been to court for sexual abuse, rape, impregnating, all of that sort of thing around that area. This is the third time. I think from this is sort of where they got to the point of, well, okay, we can no longer let any of them live, and they've both done it before separately, and this has sort of molded them into their future. Over the next few years, there was a massive list of young girls that was murdered and buried in Cromwell Street. Linda Goff, Lucy Paddington, Junetta Matt, Teresa, Alison Chambers, Shirley Robinson, Carol Ann Cooper, Shirley Hubbard, and many more, all became victims of Fred and Rose, brutally attacked, dismembered, and then buried them in the cellar. Rose had several more children over the coming years. Not all of them were biologically Fred's. Some of these were her clients. We already have Charmaine, who is now passed, Heather, Anne-Marie, May, Lucianne, Rosemary, Barry, Stephen, and Louise. All knew what went on at 25 Cromwell Street. Fred was more and more sexually aroused by his daughters. Heather and May constantly tried refusing him. This was not a good move on their part. Rose decided Heather was a problem. This was not good. Things he and Rose decided whether she was going to be a problem. Could they let her go? Could they chance her saying something? So they killed her and buried her under the patio. Given what the West was like, it was only a matter of time before someone told on them and what went on in 25 Cromwell Street. In August 1992, DC Hazel Savage found pornographic images in the home, arrested both for rape and sodomy of a minor. During the interview, Savage became aware of the abuse of their own children and the disappearance of Charmaine and Heather. Also, what and who was under the patio. Rose must have freaked out at this and attempted suicide, but later found by Steve and revived to become fine later. That case, however, went nowhere. The two young witnesses refused any further help. Thankfully, Savage was not over with them and continued to search for Charmaine and Heather, interviewing the West children, although no good ever came of that, as they were very well trained in what to say to social services, what to say to the police. They'd been trained from a very, very early age. In 1994, a warrant was issued to search the house and garden of 25 Cromwell Street. During the search, 2 remains found. Police suspected that they were of Heather and Shirley Robinson. Fred confessed, saying he had done them all alone, and Rose had no knowledge of Heather being dead. Fred also admitted that there was more bodies in the cellar. There was 9 remains found. Clearly, identifying one by one was going to be a mammoth task. Furthermore, he had admitted to killing his first wife Renee, his lover Anna McFall, and daughter Charmaine, all buried away from 25 Cromwell Street. Rose tried her best to remove herself, trying to remain that she was a victim and nothing to do with any of these crimes, which of course the police thought was absolutely ludicrous, with so much going on in the house. There was just, the children know about it, there was no way that she didn't. On December 13th, 1994, the Wests was charged 12 counts of murder. He was held on remand and sent to Winson Green, where on New Year's Day 1995 he was found dead by hanging in his cell. Now Rose was left to take the fall from all of these crimes alone. October 3rd, 1995, Rose's trial began. It was a media frenzy. Witnesses included her stepdaughter, Anne-Marie. She told the jury that her stepmom was extremely abusive, not just physically, mentally, but sexually, giving them an insight into what happened in 25 Cromwell Street. On November 22nd, 1995, she was found guilty on 10 counts of murder. She received several life terms, with having to serve a minimum of 25 years. Sometime later, this was overturned to be a whole life sentence with no chance of parole, which in the UK is a really huge thing. We generally don't do the life without parole. It's normally, if you get a life sentence, you serve 15 or 20 or 25, depending on the crime. Generally, we don't have a life means life here in the UK. Rose refused her fate and continually tried to get new evidence brought up into the trial to get a retrial. Whole mess, but obviously, public outcry, that wasn't going to happen in any hurry unless it was absolutely dead cert evidence. But with the statements of not just others but her own children, it would have to be something super amazing, which is just, it's not possible. She did it. Most believe, including myself on this, that there are more than 12 bodies. 12 are the ones that he admitted to before he wussied out and killed himself. And I'm sure there was more even before he met Rose. I believe there's gotta be. Looking at it logically with how many they did over a period of time, there has to be more bodies and there has to be somewhere. But just going back to where he buried Renee in Letterbox Field, that's a massive mamba field. Even though he told them where he buried her, it still took so much time because it had been built up, it had been moved. It wasn't the body, or the remains of the body I should say, wasn't where he left them. So to search a field of that size would be somewhat non-existent. It would just be such a struggle to do that. 25 Cromwell Street was dubbed the Houses of Horrors for obvious reasons. Gloucester Council decided that they were just going to tear down the house. They couldn't put anybody back in there. It would just be too much. So they teared down the house and made a pathway leading to the town centre, to the shops, the local shops. Rose has been in and out of the press over the years with different things. Whether she's intending to do this or not, I don't know. For me personally, I think she does. I think she likes the attention. I think she craves on that attention. But again, that is just my opinion. She was in the press on one occasion for saying that she was married to, he was the lead bass player in a band called Slade. He clearly rejected that and was like, absolutely not, that's absolutely a lie. But she was adamant that it was. Another thing that she was in the press for saying that she had found a girlfriend and wanted to marry her. Again, was it all just, you know, just for attention? I don't know. If I'm honest, I think it was. For me, I think she wants the attention. She 100% wants the attention. Her children have come forward over the years, releasing books, releasing statements of actually their life in Cromwell Street, and just I can't even just reading them and hearing the stories is so horrific. You kind of sit there and think, how do a mum and dad do that to their children? There was one story that Stephen, he was one of the older children, he done something in school and they got a telephone call saying that Stephen had done X, Y and Z in school. They chained him to the bathroom toilet naked and left him there for like 3 days. Just the horrific things that went on in that house. So for me, I'm glad that the house is gone. I don't think anyone should live in that sort of house. I'm glad it's now just a pathway. You know, it really is the house of horrors, for sure. There ain't many in the UK that have a life tariff. There really isn't. You know, it's always given a 25 years, 15 years, as I said earlier. But for me, for her to have a life, and a life meaning life, she deserves it. It's warranted, and I don't think the press or the public would ever let her get out and be okay with that. There are only a few, like her, Myra Hindley, the Craze. There are just a few that would never be allowed out of jail because there would just be uproar. There would be no good come from that. So for me, I'm glad that she's locked up. You know, this wasn't far. This is half hour, 40 minutes from where I grew up. So it really isn't that far from me. I'm also glad that she is serving her time. I think it's unfair that Fred took his own life. I think that is a complete and utter thing to do, to leave and not allow the victims to get some kind of justice. Even if I think if he'd done it after the trial, for, you know, this is just my opinion obviously, but even if he'd done it after the trial, I think people would have felt less gypped. But because he did it before the trial and New Year's Day, you know, there's a lot with Fred psychologically that, you know, why he'd done certain things, why he would say certain things. I don't think anybody's going to be able to get into his head, to be fair. But again, that's just my opinion. So I hope you liked that video, and thank you for joining me, and I shall speak to you all soon. Bye guys, don't forget to like and share and subscribe.